Mind and Matter podcast. I'm your host, Nick Jikomes, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Christopher Weikart. Dr. Weikart has a PhD in chemical engineering, and he is currently chief scientist at SiO2, an advanced materials science company that combines chemistry and engineering to create containers and surfaces for use by biotechnology, genomics, diagnostics, and consumer products companies of different kinds. One of their main focuses is actually creating a new kind of vaccine vial, which combines both glass and plastic to create a new kind of vial that is superior for storing and transporting biologics, biological materials, such as vaccines. SiO2 is currently producing an enormous number of these vials to be used for one of the new mRNA vaccines that's being used for COVID-19. And Chris described how these vials are actually made and what they're made of. And he also talked about what material science actually is and how important it actually is for many aspects of modern society. This conversation will also give you a sense for how some different parts of the COVID vaccine supply chain actually fit together that maybe you hadn't heard about before. I certainly didn't know how much of this worked, and it was fascinating to learn about how all the stuff sort of happens behind the scenes. This episode is sponsored by SiO2. For the new year in 2022, I will be doing several sponsored episodes by different companies. These are typically going to be science-related companies like biotechnology companies of different kinds, and this helps me support the podcast, keep it going, keep it growing. If you work for such a company or you know someone who works at an interesting company that's doing interesting, innovative scientific work, you can direct them to the contact page on my website, www.nickjikomes.com, and they can just shoot me a message there. I don't necessarily select anyone who solicits me for this. It has to be within the realm of what I normally discuss on the podcast, but anyone who's a scientist or founder at a science-related company that's doing interesting science work that wants to come on and talk about the actual underlying science and R&D of what they're doing. As always, if you enjoy the content on this podcast that I'm providing, please like, share, and subscribe. You can give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can watch and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to look at the video version. And you can also subscribe to my Substack, mindandmatter.substack.com. There's both a free version with different content, including a free weekly newsletter of updates and other content, and a paid version, which is just $5 a month or $50 per year. And I really appreciate that. That does help me keep the podcast going and growing. Today's show is brought to you in part by Dosist, an all-natural cannabis company specializing in dose-controlled cannabis products made with plant-based ingredients. To learn more about Dosist, their products, and where they are available, please visit their website through the link in the episode description. So with that, here's my conversation with Dr. Christopher Weikart. Dr. Chris Weikart, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you start by just telling everyone who you are, what your background is, and what you're doing professionally?
Yes, I'm Chris Weikart. I'm the chief scientist at SiO2 Material Science, and basically I work for a company that manufactures primary containers, things like vials, syringes, and cartridges for liquid injectable drug products.
Interesting. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today has to do with the vials that you're making, and in particular, the vials that you're making for some of the COVID vaccines that are in wide circulation right now. So you said the company is SiO2 and you're a materials science company. So yes. Can you give us an overview on what exactly materials science is?
Yeah, the name of the company may be a bit strange. So maybe we just start with the SiO2 piece. SiO2 is actually a chemical formula for silicon dioxide, which is a key ingredient of glass. So we are a material science company, meaning that we develop products utilizing material science as a scientific field. So we are very good at understanding how materials, how to manufacture materials and make them work for packaging of, as I said, drug products, in particular biologic drugs. We use a polymer container, and then we put a microscopic layer of a glassy-like material on the inside, which is this SiO2 component.
So my understanding is, historically there's been a lot of different use cases for different types of materials for things like liquid injectables and just to store medicines in. So at a very high level, you could have a vial or packaging that's made out of some kind of plastic polymer, and then you can have things that are made out of glass. So before we get into the specifics of what you guys have innovated and exactly how you are manufacturing the vials that we're going to talk about, can you give us maybe a historical synopsis on how drug packaging has sort of evolved in your lifetime and the extent to which plastics versus glass tend to be used?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so glass has been used for a very long time. I mean, for certainly for hundreds of years, and more recently is used predominantly in the packaging of drug products, and particularly liquid injectable drugs. It's certainly been the material of choice in the form of vials and syringes and so forth. Plastics being a newer material. Of course, it was invented at the dawn of World War II, and has since penetrated many markets. But it really is not a good material in itself for packaging these types of drugs. So glass, again, just historically, people think it's inert. It's a pretty strong material, and has been used a long time. So therefore, they use it now. Drug products have evolved a lot over the years, and more recently you hear more about a class of drugs called biologics. These are drugs that are actually derived from living cells. So they have cells will produce things like proteins and peptides, and those are harvested and injected into folks to treat a lot of different diseases. And what they find is these more complex drugs that evolved over the course of decades have special packaging needs, and glass probably not the best material. Even plastic alone is not the best material. The reason why is because glass, for instance, can break. It can leach materials into the drug product, and certainly even plastics can. They're not ultimately a very clean product. So what we've done is we've kind of invented a new hybrid material that takes advantage of the advantages of glass and the advantages of plastic, and then fuse those together into a new product without those materials' disadvantages. And so we basically sell a product that's ready to fill. It's clean, sterile, gets rid of any leachables or anything that can contaminate the drug product, which you'd commonly find in both glass and plastic. And it's unbreakable. It's tough, resilient, and can stand the test of time. So that's what our products are about, and it's really a revolutionary type of packaging, and we've been promoting it for about the past 10 years. So the company started in 2011, and we spent a good deal of that time developing the product. I'd say about half that time was a lot of R&D investment, and now we're in a very much in a commercial stage and selling our product to a variety of customers.
I see. So if I'm understanding, the driving force for why you guys started and why you guys wanted to build this kind of hybrid container was that as biologics became more and more common and more widely used, there was greater need for this type of product because this material can be contaminated by things leaching through something that's only made of glass or plastic, and those things just don't contain biologics in the way that ideally you need them.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to managing the stability of these new drug products. As I said, they're ultimately very sensitive. They have special needs, and yeah. I mean, certainly there are a lot of drugs that are packaging glass today. The market is dominated by it, and there have been improvements. I'd say there's step change improvements in glass to try to take a Band-Aid approach to solving a lot of these problems, but ultimately you still have to deal with them. And what we do is we offer something new that basically eliminates a lot of these issues. As I said, breakage, leachables into the drug formulation. I think that's what's unique about us. Now, the industry has been entrenched with glass for so long. There they're pretty resistant to change. And when you invest a lot of time and money and effort in installing glass into your packaging, you can understand why they're resistant to change. So ordinarily, it's very difficult to transition existing drug, especially if it's a blockbuster drug that's $1 billion investment, over to a new package, because there's obviously risks associated with that. So we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on early phase development drugs. These are in phase 1 or phase 2 clinical trials, where a company would be more receptive to introducing a new package, like own. And it's a lot easier to make those sorts of transitions. I think a good example of that would be some of the COVID-19 vaccines that have more recently been introduced to the marketplace. And of course, we're selling into that market as we stand today, particularly for Moderna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to talk about some of that stuff. Before we get there, I would love to understand the process, like how you guys actually build these hybrid products. I think maybe a good lead into that could be if you just describe for us, to someone who doesn't know anything about this, which includes myself, basically, what at the molecular level, what is just regular old glass and how is it made? And how does that differ from what plastic is and how it's made?
Yeah. So, I mean, your ordinary glass that most of us come in contact with is not what they're using for packaging these drugs. So the class of glass, or the materials of glass that are used is what's called borosilicate. Okay, so that's something that actually was invented in around 1880, believe it or not, by shot glass, and that's been used for a lot of different things, including packaging of drug products. And it has basically silica, the SiO2 that's in our company name, and a bunch of other what I call metal oxides, things like boron, borosilicate, obviously is the name of it, and other metal oxides that help you process the glass, makes it a little more resistant to the things you put in the glass, because glass can leach things into the contents. Basically, borosilicate has been that sort of mainstay material in the industry. What we do is obviously very, very different. We're molding a plastic container, and then we're putting a microscopic layer of a glass-like material on the inside of our containers, which is completely different from what's done today with glass vials and syringes.
Yeah, can you go into a little bit more detail on the process for making this here, and really kind of unpack for us what level of resolution are we talking about here? So when you talk about putting these coats on plastic, how thick are these layers, and what is the nitty-gritty in terms of how that's made?
Yeah, so we'd start off with a polymer, and that's of course molded into the various vials, syringes, and so on. It's not too different than the process that's used to mold like your beverage container for various colas and water. A similar process that's used. We do use a polymer that is medical grade, so it's a very clean resin. It's basically highly transparent. I mean, if you put our vial next to a glass vial, with the untrained eye, it'd be very difficult to tell the difference. So they look very similar. But given it's a polymer, it's about half the weight of a normal glass vial. And then, of course, after the vial is made, or the syringe, we put this, as you said, this microscopic layer on the inside. And we use a technology that actually is more similar to the manufacturing of microelectronic devices. So microchips, all the processors that are in your computer, in your iPhone, and other electronics. We use a process that's very similar to that to put down this microscopic layer. The layer itself is actually made of 3 layers. In totality, it's about 800 times to 1,000 times thinner than a human hair. And so it's very, very thin. You cannot see it. As I said, microscopic. So you need some some very sophisticated techniques to analyze it, ensure it's there, and to make sure that every single vial and syringe or whatever we're making, it's present and it does its job. So the process is it's referred to as a plasma. So we think of like the various phases of materials around us. We think of solids, we think of liquids, we think of gases, and there's always that fourth state that we don't think about too much about. It's called plasma. We actually utilize plasmas to put down these very, very thin microscopic layers on the inside of the container. It basically lines the inside of the container to protect the drug product from plastic. It's ultra pure. It's obviously very, very thin. And it's highly inert, far more inert than ordinary glass.
So you're basically painting an extremely thin layer of glass onto a plastic vial. Presumably the reason that you use the plastic vial at all is because it's easily moldable and makeable. But then this thin layer of glass is super thin, but also super strong. And it's basically, when you say it's inert, you just mean there's no sort of chemical reaction that's going to happen between the biologic that you're putting inside the vial and the actual glass layer itself. And then also nothing can leach in from the outside.
You got it. I mean, you summarized that very well. I mean, so the polymer, just take the polymer. Why do we use it? I told you it was medical grade. I told you it was very clean, but it's really, really tough. It can take a ton of abuse, far more than glass can. Now, glass is a strong material, but when you mold it into things like vials and syringes, there's always defects, and those defects can lead to breakage. It's quite common, more common than we think. It can, for instance, if you were to break one single vial or even a syringe for a drug that's maybe $1,000 per dose, not uncommon for these biologic drugs, can be quite expensive. You obviously don't want it to break. So our vials and syringes can take a tremendous amount of abuse, and that's where the polymer comes in. And because it's a polymer, most polymers have additives in them, and you don't want those additives contaminating the drug. So this is where the coating comes in. The coating is, as you said, highly inert, doesn't contaminate the drug product, more inert than most other materials that you might come in contact with. Very, very resilient, very tough. It can take the kind of abuse the vial is going to see, even though it's very, very thin. And we've engineered it in a way such that it minimizes any interaction with that drug product, the active ingredient in there that the patient's going to see. You don't want to lose any of it. You don't want any of it sticking to the side of the vial. You don't want it to turn into a ball of what we call aggregates, can be very common in glass. All of those things are eliminated by the coating that we put on the inside. And this is where material science comes in. I mean, material science is basically the study of materials and leveraging their advantages by combining them in different ways. And that's basically what we've done. By basically engineering it with the right composition, the right chemistry, and the right thickness to protect and preserve the drug product.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were working with your vials are used to as containers for some of the new mRNA vaccines that are used for COVID. My understanding with those, so that's a biologic. It's a lipid encapsulated mRNA molecule that's going to be in the vial. My understanding, too, is that those need to be stored at very cold temperatures, and I wonder if that's relevant here in terms of how these vials would hold up at such a cold temperature compared to traditional glass.
Yeah, there's interesting challenges there because the temperatures are so cold. For instance, the Moderna vaccine, I think initially they required it to be stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius. I mean, that's really, really cold. Pfizer required it initially to be stored at minus 70. I mean, it's even colder, right? So, and then there's other therapies that even require even colder temperatures, down to cryogenic temperatures, which can reach minus 180. It seems extreme, but really the whole idea there is, again, to preserve it so that it can be then reconstituted and then injected into a patient. So the problem with glass when it comes to those temperatures is, remember, not only do you have a vial, a glass container vial, you also have this rubber stopper that has to be inserted into the top of that vial. And as the temperature drops, those two materials, this rubbery material and this glass material, very, very different. And what ends up happening to the rubber is it actually starts to harden and it starts to shrink. And glass and rubber shrink at different rates. So it's quite possible that you could get a leak. It can happen if they're not matched appropriately. It's an issue that they have to deal with. It's not an issue with our vial because you have a polymer and you have a rubber material. They're very similar in some ways, so they shrink at the same rates. They're better matched in terms of sealing, and so your propensity for leakage is far reduced. Also, the propensity for breakage at these temperatures can be higher for glass than for our polymer. So there's quite a few advantages that we can leverage in our product to showcase to our customers, and Moderna being one of them.
So how long does it take you to make a vial compared to a normal glass vial?
Yeah, our lines are capable of very, very fast throughput. I can just tell you, so about, before the COVID pandemic came along, we were producing probably on the order of about 10 million vials a year, or 10 million of various container size vials a year.
Wow.
Once we were very fortunate to get some government funded money through Operation Warp Speed. We got about $143 million. That was for expanding our capacity in Auburn, Alabama, where we're located. We basically went from 10 million vials a year to 10 million vials a month. And that was because of our ability to expand production capacity. So in terms of comparison, our throughput, it's really unlimited. It's, obviously you need money to build additional capacity, but we have very, very fast throughput machines that mold, coat, package them. And then the only thing we don't do on site is the sterilization. We send that out to a third party to be sterilized. And that's one thing we haven't mentioned is the ability to fill our containers because they already are sterile. Glass typically is manufactured dirty, not like they intend to do that, but before it's a dirty product that has to be sterilized and washed before it can be used on a line for fill and finish. Ours is ready to use. We call it RTU, ready to use. Because it is already sterile and ready to fill with the drug product.
I see. So you mentioned Moderna was using your vials. So basically, are you selling directly to like the vaccine manufacturer or the drug company themselves, and they're just ordering 1 or 5 or 10 million vials, and then that gets shipped to be sterilized, and then it goes to them to be filled? Is that like the order of operations?
Yeah. So Moderna, just to be clear, Moderna has multiple suppliers. We're being one of them. I think the demand, obviously, for so many of these vials, and our ability to expand our production capabilities, it certainly exceeded their needs. So they have multiple vendors, no question about it. But they're the ones that procure them from us. We ship them not to Moderna, where they make the vaccine, but we ship it to what they call their CMO, or their contract manufacturing organization. This would be the company that would do the fill finish. So we ship directly to them, and they are the ones that do the filling and the finishing and the capping and the labeling of the product before it goes out. So while Moderna purchases it from us, we don't ship directly to them. We send it to what they call their CMO. Mm-hmm.
Now, as a more general question here, everyone in almost any business that you might be in, or even just ordinary people, have felt in some way the effects of a lot of the supply chain shocks that we've experienced in the last couple of years. Is there have you guys or other glass companies experienced any of that in terms of getting your raw materials? What have been the constraints there? Has anything slowed you down the last 2 years?
It really hasn't. And of course, there has been a shortage of glass for the glass industry. This has been reported on for quite some time now, and it's certainly hindered glass companies' ability to fulfill the demand for folks like Pfizer and Moderna. And of course, you still have this growing biologic drug market that continues to grow. So we have actually zero ties to any sort of glass raw materials, and I know it seems a bit odd because we do put down a material that is like glass, but so obviously as I said, we start off with a polymer, so that's obviously not glass. The glassy material that goes down on every vial and syringe is more closely tied again to the microelectronics industry. They actually use liquids that ends up becoming a gas in a process and converted into a solid as a glass-like material. We use the same raw materials as say a manufacturer of the microchips that are in the computer.
And what is that? Like, what is the molecular formula of this material?
It's referred to as an organosilane, and as I said, you can buy it from a number of different manufacturers. You have to remember, the amount of material that goes down on each and every vial and syringe. We said it was on a microscopic scale. So let's just take one vial, for instance. Our typical vial may be only 6 grams, in total after it's coated. About 400 micrograms of that is coating. So raw materials for the coating are minuscule compared to the vial itself. So as I said, completely no ties to the glass industry in terms of raw materials, and no problem with gaining access to those for our manufacturing our vials. So it hasn't been a hindrance whatsoever.
Interesting. Okay, so you're basically not slowed down by anything, in part because these layers of material are so small that you've probably just got some relatively enormous stockpile that's going to last you a very long time.
That's right. You'd be surprised. We have basically a small canister of that connected to one of our manufacturing lines. Everybody looks at it like, wow, that's not very much. But if you think again about how much material actually goes down, a little goes a long way in our products, and we certainly take advantage of that.
So, is this the only thing you guys make? Are you specialized for like vaccine vials?
No, not really. Actually, as I said before, our focus previously was on a variety of different biologic drugs that were completely outside the realm of this vaccine market. Only because of the pandemic did we shift our focus over to this. But we do make a bunch of other products for, as I said, a variety of different biologic drugs. But we also have, interestingly enough, a baby bottle that basically takes advantage of this same technology. It's sort of again, a lot of mothers don't want their baby's milk in contact with a polymer. There's certainly some negative connotations of things leaching into the baby's milk. So we do sell a baby bottle product. We have a line of products for the laboratory. For instance, blood collection tubes. Again, leveraging the same technology, aligned polymeric blood collection tube. So you don't want anything getting into the blood that's pulled into the tube, and many other things, microtiter plates, collection tubes of various sorts for the laboratory.
How, I really know nothing about this area. So when we're thinking about like everyday plastics that would be used in something like a baby bottle, or just, I've got a cup here that's made out of some kind of plastic. Can you give us a sense for like what the actual risk level is in terms of things leaching out, like the polymers actually coming off into the liquid you might be drinking, or stuff coming through from the outside? Is that, Is that a major issue, or is it a sort of a rare occurrence?
Well, I mean, certainly the FDA regulates this for foods and beverages, so I think the risk profile there is quite low. But there certainly is the perception. I just use baby bottles as an example, and there certainly have been reports of things in baby bottles that are not good for the baby. I mean, and I'm certainly not here to claim that's true or false, but certainly the perception is reality for a lot of folks. And we basically serve that. We can provide a product that can be certain that nothing contaminates that milk, whether it's harmful or not. I cannot say, but I can certainly assure that there's nothing getting into that milk. And that gives mothers, certainly a level of confidence in our products, reason why they buy our product. And that's something new that we just recently introduced last year, again, leveraging that same technology. I mean, for drugs, it's a little bit different. And I think the risk profile there is much, much higher, because if you alter that drug, as I said, these biologics are very complex. They can result in bad things. And, for instance, could solicit an immune response in a patient. You got to remember, you're injecting these directly into your bloodstream. If the drug is not in a state to help the patient, it can be perceived by the body as a foreign invader, and it can trigger an immune response, anything from anaphylactic shock to a rash, and even potentially death. Now, the risks are on the low end, but I mean, if it's your mom or your sister or your brother, or I mean, what do you want? You're going to want to go with something that's not going to have that kind of risk profile. The drug companies obviously manage that risk, but we obviously can reduce that risk burden much, much lower than standard packaging.
I see. So you mentioned that like a company like Moderna has multiple suppliers of the vials that they're using. So some of, if a million people that got the Moderna vaccine you were talking to them, some fraction of them would have had one that was stored in one of your vials. Some fraction of them would have had one stored in another kind of vial that was maybe more standard medical glass, and so on and so forth. I mean, is it conceivable that there would be different rates of contamination for the same exact vaccine in this case, based on what it was actually stored in?
Yeah, certainly there would be differences. Moderna, obviously, getting some glass products. I know, and there's been public disclosures on a Corning glass supplying a new type of glass, a new glass that lowers the leachables burden, meaning the less contamination into the product. But it still breaks. It still has other issues. As I said before, our product does eliminate a lot of those issues. So there are some new products coming online, new materials, but as I said before, they're more of a Band-Aid approach, in my opinion. They're really not eliminating these types of problems. But again, I think for Moderna and Pfizer, the demand is just so high at this point in time that they're pulling products from various locations. I think once this supply chain issue settles down, they're gonna have to choose or decide upon a given platform, and we certainly think we offer the best product for their vaccine, and we certainly hope that they'll choose us for anything they develop in the future. And we got to remember, before the pandemic came along, they weren't even focused on COVID. They had a whole line of very interesting and innovative drug products based on this mRNA technology. Very exciting stuff. All of their attention, obviously, is on this vaccine for COVID, but I think it's going to swing the other way. And again, you're going to need new innovative packaging, and I think we provide that.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know, so if I think back to when I was in college, I didn't study material science, but I remember it was something that you could major in. And I think, it was relatively new at the time. For those people who are listening that are unfamiliar, especially people that may be students or might become college students in the near future. Can you talk about what material science is in terms of what basic scientific disciplines do you learn about to become a material scientist?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly major in material science and engineering. There's a lot of schools that offer this at major universities across the country and in the world. But basically, as I said, it's basically a study of materials and understanding their chemistry. So chemistry is obviously a discipline that can be leveraged here, not just on the molecular level, but also at a higher level. And then there's the physical properties of materials. How do they interact with other materials? In our case, it's drugs. How do they handle abuse? How do they handle temperature cycling? If you put a chemical inside of them, how do they interact? So there's certainly some physics, there's chemistry, certainly math, and engineering. So, and that's really where problem solving comes in. How do you invent a better package? And what should that look like? And as I said, I go back to, really understanding the advantages of glass and the advantages of plastics. And they both have clear advantages, and they've been leveraged for decades for all kinds of things that surround us in everyday life. So how do you combine those advantages but not have the disadvantages? And that's where you have to understand a little bit about engineering. How do you combine materials that ordinarily shouldn't be combined or aren't ordinarily combined into a product? So problem solving and bringing engineering to solve those problems using chemistry, physics, and mathematics are key. There's a whole field of science around various materials, polymers being one of them. So polymer science we bring to bear here. And then a whole field of material science in what we call thin film technology. So as I said, everything from what's in your microprocessors to coatings that go on, so anti-reflective coatings that go on your glasses, or coatings that go on windows for reflecting light. All of that science is leveraged in the microscopic layer that we put down on each and every container. So a lot of disciplines have been brought to bear in studying materials and, again, exploiting their benefits.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's really sort of a material science, I think it's fair to say, is applied math, physics, and chemistry. And then, of course, in many cases, there's a component of biology there as well, because you have to understand what you're actually putting into these materials.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a component that's, it's a little more difficult because, of course, when you're working with some of these drug companies, they're not going to tell you basically their secret sauce, if you or their secret recipe. But they'll maybe give you some idea of what we certainly know a lot of these drugs are based on proteins and peptides and amino acids that are assembled together in different ways. But they're not going to tell you exactly. And in some cases, they can't tell you exactly because these molecules are so complex. But yeah, certainly understanding the biological significance of these drug products and how they interact in a formulation can really help understand how they're going to behave in your package. So there's some surface science and some interfacial science, as we call it, of how a surface will interact with a drug formulation. You don't have to think about that too much for some of the less complex drugs, but in the field of biologics, it's very, very important to understand that.
I see. So is it true that, for biologics, for things like vaccines, that there's not necessarily like one material that would be ideal for all biologics that you might put into these things? You might, in theory, you want to like customize it to each thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I say for the vast majority of products we've encountered, our product has been just fine. But there have been some specific cases where we've actually had to engineer the surface of our coating to, say, minimize interactions. Some drugs are quite different, and they do interact in ways you wouldn't expect. But we can change the surface of the container to minimize those interactions. It's one of the advantages of our technology, that we can, as I said, bring some surface engineering to bear, to minimize anything that might cause damage or change the drug product. That has been a small percentage of the products that we've encountered, but still significant, and maybe in the difference of introducing a drug to the marketplace or not. And in some few cases, we've been able to showcase those advantages to our customers.
I imagine, like on your team, you've got different kinds of scientists doing different kinds of things. Can you give us a sense for like, what are some of the key scientific roles, and what are those people doing? How much of it is, intellectual work versus, actual hands-on work to say build some device that's part of your manufacturing chain?
Yeah, so I mean, that's changed quite a bit over the 10 years we've been around. I mean, initially it was a lot of focus around research and development. So there was obviously a lot of what I call benchtop work, understanding, what are these processes going to look like? Utilizing material science to understand what is our product ultimately going to look like, and how does it address all of these problems with current packaging. Okay, so first 4 or 5 years, a lot of research development to understand what the product's going to look like, what the manufacturing process might look like. Then the next 5 or so years, we brought a lot of more engineering to bear to scale up the process, because initially we were coding. Day one, we were coding and manufacturing bottles, 2 bottles at a time, then 10 bottles at a time, and then of course, obviously, how do you mass produce that with millions of containers, utilizing a technology that may not seem very obvious how you would scale that up, right? I mean, so today, I think the workforce has changed from the standpoint of, we have a lot of folks fixing problems that were specific to the drug industry. And then later on, it was more about how do you fix problems for scale up and mass production. So we do have a lot of engineering folks in the areas of mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, automation, because a lot of our manufacturing has a ton of automation. These are in clean room environments, so you want to keep manufacturing free of particulates. It needs to be sterile, and we do have a lot of robots. So automation engineering and programmers have to be brought to bear to eliminate human contact with our products, to keep it sterile. So it's interesting how a company first starts, because I was literally employee number 6, and now we have a company of 500. So again, the company evolves, and you have to change the workforce accordingly to address what stage you're in commercializing the product.
Mm-hmm. But you have a lot of people that basically, if they have a college degree, they probably studied something like engineering or something like physics.
Yep. Yeah. As I said, I think the majority of folks that are working in our production areas and that the equipment have engineering degrees. As I said, mechanical engineering being one of them, computer engineering being another, industrial engineering being another, chemical engineering on more of on the coding side. But all of those disciplines are brought to bear. We do have a lot of molding engineers. They maybe have their bread and butter is mechanical engineering, but they specialize in how to mold polymers into containers. There's a whole discipline around that as well.
How did you actually get involved with this company? Was this something that you expected to happen, or what was sort of your origin story with respect to getting into this line of business?
Yeah, so I originally I worked at the Dow Chemical Company in Midland, Michigan for about 11 years. This certainly was not on my radar. What happened actually was one of my former bosses at Dow had retired and left the company, and got in touch with me because he was consulting for a company down here in Auburn, Alabama. And they had this idea of starting a brand new business centered around new and innovative packaging for drug products. And of course, the focus being on biologic drugs. I certainly was not looking at that time. I couldn't even tell you where Auburn, Alabama was on the map. so that had to be figured out first. But I came down, and I really liked sort of their vision of what they wanted to create. At Dow, I was part of core R&D, so I got to be involved in a lot of new products, but never really saw it to the very end, which is exciting itself. But sort of, you'd love to see something, be a part of that path to developing something all the way through to commercialization and sale. That was an opportunity for me to be a part of that journey, from early conception all the way to commercialization. So I think that really excited me, that I could be a part of that process and that journey. There was a very strong connection with the Dow Chemical Company from a consulting standpoint. So I knew a few of the individuals that were consulting with our owner, Bobby Abrams, and they were all obviously part of the decision-making process for me to make that jump down here to something completely new and different with a company that only had 5 employees. So I had to do a little bit of understanding of what I was getting into before I made the journey, but I certainly don't regret it. It's been a great ride, and I continue to see new applications for this technology, and I'm certainly part of that journey.
Another thing I'm interested in is, so you mentioned that you guys got government funding as part of the larger Operation Warp Speed effort around just vaccine, scaling up vaccine production in every way that we need it right now. How does, I'm curious about how that actually works. So like I work in the private sector, and we have investors who, give the company money because they expect there to be growth and they'll get a financial return. How does the relationship with the government work here in terms of how they determine who to give money, how much to give, and if they're not investors in the same way that you would get at a startup, getting money from investors. So how are they measuring like their return here, and what does it actually mean for the government?
Yeah. So obviously, we were one of many companies that received funds to expand production, to assist with the COVID pandemic. So, basically, we worked through an organization called BARDA, and they were the ones that we had contacted, and basically submitted a proposal that we could certainly assist in the production of containers for the vaccine itself. So there was money allocated, obviously, to companies developing the vaccine, those that were packaging the vaccine, and other entities as well. So I think for the government, they wanted to obviously assist in any way they could. This is actually grant money, so it's not money that requires repayment. It's as you said, it's different from investment. From an investor putting dollars in, but it went all straight to capital investment, machines to build equipment that will ultimately manufacture these containers, and also, of course, the buildings and so on and so forth. So we initially got $143 million for the expansion. And then just earlier this year, we got another $63 million, again, for additional expansion and capacity, again, all to address the demand for these containers. But it is a different relationship, obviously, than an investor. I mean, it's completely different. They do come in and they do audit us. We have to report to them on a quarterly basis on how we're doing and how we're achieving our objectives and our goals.
I see. So there's like checkpoints built in terms of if you get like do they give it to you all at once, or are there different tranches of money, and like as long as you're sort of hitting your goals, it keeps coming in?
Yeah, there's milestones that you have to achieve, and of course there's a lot of oversight from the government to make sure that those are being met. So we meet them regularly and obviously address any concerns that are needed. to be ironed out, and then the money comes in increments, and of course, as it comes in, we just continually focus on expanding our capacity. As I said, going from 10 million vials a year to 10 million vials a month is a huge expansion effort. So it requires not just capital, buildings, but people. I mean, we went from literally 200 to basically doubled our folks here at our Auburn, Alabama facility. Which is a feat unto itself in certainly less than 6 months that we did that.
How big is the facility?
Yeah, our manufacturing facility is about 300,000 square feet. That includes obviously office space, but the majority of that is manufacturing space. These are clean rooms that maintain, as I said, a sterile but clean environment for all the products that we make. Very different from a glass manufacturing facility in terms of cleanliness and sterility.
Mm-hmm. And are there any are there any like interesting R&D projects that you can talk about? Anything that you're not fully building and selling yet, but any new kinds of materials for new kinds of applications?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're certainly focused in quite a few different areas. A couple of which I could comment on would be on the cell and gene therapy markets. This is an emerging area, very exciting. Cell and gene therapies to address some really tough diseases that are out there. A lot of these are obviously going through clinical trials today. These particular class of biologics has very cold temperature requirements, some down as low as minus 180 degrees Celsius. That's very, very cold. That's like minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit. So but again, because they're so sensitive, they require storage at those temperatures. Our packaging being a great candidate for those types of packaging. So we've been heavily invested and working with customers developing these new therapies. Also in the area of freeze-dried drugs. A lot of times drugs are freeze-dried, again, because they're just not stable at room temperature or even frozen. This is a freeze-dried process where you freeze it, but you remove all the moisture that's in the product. Very different than just freezing it. Again, all about just preserving stability. And actually, some of the drug companies or the vaccine makers like Moderna and Pfizer are looking at ways of freeze drying their vaccines to preserve it for longer periods of time. So we have a line of vials that are ideal for freeze drying drugs, and we've been promoting that as well. So those are just a couple of the areas that we've been focusing our efforts on.
Interesting. Do you have any recommendations on any resources or just sort of general areas that people would look into if they were interested in studying material science or getting started in that direction?
Yeah, certainly there's a number of different, as I said, universities that specialize in this. I'm not gonna mention those by name, but I mean, you can get online and find universities that specialize in material science and engineering as a field of discipline. There are certainly a lot of journals, some of which we publish in. We do publish certainly through Parenteral Drug Association. Now, this is specifically for drug products, including liquid injectables and biologics. But there's a lot of material science that are brought to bear in the packaging area, and so we publish in that area. Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences is another area. We're obviously focusing on the fields of science that are specific to drug products, but certainly a lot of material science articles that are in those journals. And I think if you come to visit our facility, you'll get a lesson in material science. We do offer tours here, and be happy to entertain folks that like to see our facilities and understand our products and how we leverage material science to make our products.
Interesting. Well, this is a fascinating area that I didn't expect to actually learn this much about, but it's obviously very important given the times that we're in. Is there anything else you want to speak about before I let you go, Chris, that has to do with what you guys are doing with respect to these vials?
No, it's really really a pleasure to share about what we're doing as a company and some of the new things that we're working on. But as I said, right now is our main attention is on the vaccine for COVID, and but at the same time, addressing a lot of new drug products that are coming through the pipeline. And I've just biological sciences and these new drugs is certainly not my area of expertise, but I've certainly learned a lot over the 10 years I've been here. And I think if I had done it all over again, I probably would have focused on molecular engineering of some of these drug molecules. It's just so incredible, the diseases that one can treat these days. And I think, at some point you're going to see a lot of these common diseases and disappear, or at least be able to be treatable so people can live their lives in a more normal way. So I'm just so excited to be a part of that path, and providing the packaging that can enable some of these new drugs into the marketplace.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Do you guys have like a website, or are there any like YouTube videos up that people can go to learn more about how all this stuff works?
Yeah. You can go to our website, for the SO2 Material Science website, and then we do have a number of YouTube videos that you can find on both our website as well as on LinkedIn. You'll see videos, not just our manufacturing process, but how we make our products, and a number of videos of our employees, of our management, explaining what we're all about and what we do, and again, some of the advantages of our products. So, I would say, LinkedIn, as well as our company webpage, can explain a lot of that.
All right. Well, I will link to some of that stuff in the show notes for people who are interested in checking it out. But Chris Weikart, thanks for walking us through all this, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Nick. It's an absolute pleasure.